I'm going to be talking about my thesis project at the University of Oviedo in Spain about heavy metal contamination in fish from the Korle Lagoon and Ghanaian markets with implications for consumers. So heavy metals are naturally occurring in the Earth's crust, while some of them are essential macro and micronutrients for the human body. Others are non-essential toxic agents such as mercury and lead and become toxic even in very low concentrations. So what happens today is that industries are exploiting and processing heavy metals, and these and other anthropogenic activities release heavy metals in the environment, sometimes in such great amounts that they can reach toxic levels. So in the aquatic environment, they accumulate in sediments, but are also transferred in the aquatic food chain. And if these contaminated fish are eaten, they can have adverse effect, the metals, on the human body, such as disorders of the liver or the kidney, as well as impacts on the nervous or reproductive system. Furthermore, some heavy metals are also human carcinogens. So what is important for the nutritional value of fish as valuable source of protein and omega-3 fatty acids might be comprised through high level of heavy metals in the fish. So in Ghana, seafood consumption is 26 kilograms per year and capita, and thus way above the African and global average. The country has a large inland and marine fishing industry, showing the high nutritional and economic importance of seafood. Furthermore, Golden et al. Predicted in Nature a fall in fish catches of around 20% in the Gulf of Guinea in the coming decades. So we got samples from 2 fishing markets and fishermen from the Korle Lagoon, all located in the Ghanaian coastline adjacent to the Gulf of Guinea. So Korle Lagoon is located in the center of the capital Accra and a very densely populated area adjacent to the old Fadama slum, but also to the Agbogbloshie scrap market, where there's a processing and disposal of electronic waste. So the lagoon receives various effluents from the surrounding area. And while it was a prestigious wetland area until the 1960s, it's today heavily polluted and altered environment and a risk area for contaminants. So despite this heavy pollution, small-scale fishing activities in the lagoon continue, and fish catches are not commercialized through market chain, which is why they're likely to be consumed by the local population. Furthermore, restoration efforts by the government, mainly through dredging, are another source of potential resuspension of the metals back to the water column. So the concentration of heavy metals in fish and related health risks for consumers are widely studied. In the area, studies mainly focused on the emerging impact of electronic waste on the environment and human health. And in the Korle Lagoon, contamination was measured in sediments and in the water body. However, to date, we could find only one study that investigated 2 fish species in the lagoon and concluded that the consumption should be prohibited due to high levels of cadmium and lead. So we hypothesized that this consumption of fish is expected to pose potential health hazards to consumers by quantifying heavy metals and fish and evaluating the health risks from their consumption. Overall, the study focused more on the Korle Lagoon samples and used the fish from the markets as a comparison. Coming to the methods, we took muscle tissue of every fish as it's the most commonly consumed part. First, we did species identification with DNA barcoding using CoE as a molecular marker. And afterwards, we quantified 9 heavy metals with ICP-MS spectrometry. The concentrations in microgram per kilogram for every metal were related to the permissible levels set by the FAO, WHO, or European Commission, and were further used for the calculation of hazard indices for the health risk assessment. These hazard indices are formulas that are commonly used for a health risk assessment for heavy metal in foodstuff, and they can be adjusted for different individuals and populations by adjusting body weight, exposure duration, and so on. We have the estimated weekly intake per kilogram body weight, which can then be related to the provisional weekly intake that is set by the WHO for every metal. And it's ranging quite a lot. So depending on the threshold to the body, we have the mercury with 1.6 and zinc with above 2000 microgram per kilogram body weight. We also calculated the target hazard quotient, which is the relation of the exposure to the substance, in this case the metal, and to a level where no health effects are expected. So if this quotient is above 1, potential health risk can occur. Coming to the results, we found 2 different mullet species in Korle Lagoon and Pompano, as well as law croaker, Atlantic chub mackerel for the markets, and 3 shark samples of a higher trophic level. Coming to the results, I will only speak of those that were above the threshold levels. So we have the shark species in red, the Korle Lagoon in blue, and the marketed mackerel and croaker in green, related to the concentrations, which were set for 410 microgram per kilogram for arsenic, exceeded in all mean values of the fish species, up to 29 milligram per kilogram in Sorbeck angel shark. Mercury was set for 500 microgram per kilogram by the European Commission, which was exceeded in all shark species up to 1.5 milligram per kilogram in hammerhead shark, was also elevated in Pompano with around 300 microgram per kilogram. Lead concentrations were below the threshold level, except for 1 blue shark, but also elevated in Pompano with a bit more than 200 microgram. Coming to the hazard indices, we have the fish species on the x-axis, the Korle Lagoon, marketed mackerel and croaker, and the shark species. And this EWI was related to the PTVI set by the WHO, calculated for a consumer with 70 kilogram body weight and a daily consumption rate of about 200 gram. For arsenic, we can see that the levels were only below for white mullet and Pompano. And for mercury, we can see also that it was below in white mullet again, also in gray mullet and low croaker. However, the value was nearly twice as much for mercury in Pompano than the PTVI. The target hazard quotient was calculated with the same assumptions, additionally with the exposure duration of 64 years, which is the average life expectancy of the Ghanaian population. And we can see that all values were exceeded for arsenic. And for mercury, it was only below 1 for grey mullet and low croaker, very slightly below. Overall, we can see for all hazard indices that the values were very high in all 3 shark species. So what are the implications for consumers? We found all metals within the muscle tissue. However, 2 of them, arsenic and mercury, are of potential health concern. This is very complex since the tissue has a mixture of different contaminants and their toxicities vary depending on the range of the health hazards effect to the consumers. It also depends on the individual consumer. So the hazard indices are varying with body weight, exposure duration, consumption frequency, and quantity of fish intake. It also varies among the fish species and even among individual fish. And it's potentially dangerous for children and pregnant women, especially the mercury exposure during pregnancy. Overall, it also strongly depends upon the speciation of the metal, meaning that, for example, we measured overall arsenic with the ICP-MS. However, only the inorganic form of arsenic is posing potential health hazards to consumers. So to conclude, sharks exceeded the permissible fresh weight levels for arsenic, mercury, and lead, last one only in blue shark. We found very high concentrations of arsenic and mercury exceeding the threshold levels of hazard indices. And last one could be explained through the high concentration of mercury in the shark species. Thus, the consumption should be avoided. Also, sawback angel shark is critically endangered species as classified by IUCN. Market samples, mackerel and law croaker, are exceeding permissible levels for arsenic in fresh weight. Mackerel is above the threshold for the daily consumption, and if the consumer, for example, has a lower body weight, also law croaker is exceeding these values. It is important to notice that even if the hazard values are exceeded, it does not mean that adverse effects are immediately occurring. But the study is following the precautionary approach. This is why a daily consumption of more than 200 gram market samples should be done with caution. Coming to Korle Lagoon. So compared to the previous studies, cadmium and lead levels were unexpectedly low. Mullets pose the lowest risk of mercury exposure, while Pompano, with a similar trophic level than the market samples, had nearly twice as much mercury as mackerel and was also higher than in croaker. Even if cobalt, copper, and lead were way below the thresholds for the hazard indices, and they were higher than in croaker, than in sharks and mackerel. So for Korle Lagoon, we recommend that a frequent consumption of Pompano by pregnant women should be avoided. So research priorities are to concentrate on human health and fisheries in Ghana, especially with the emerging of the adjacent e-waste site Agbogbloshie, but also related to the prediction that fish catches might fall in the coming decades. We also recommend further monitoring of biota, sediments, and water to get a better overview of the temporal spatial variability of pollution in the area, but also to obtain accurate data from the local population about their diet and interaction with the lagoon. I would like to thank very much Naki Agiman and Ebenezer Ekuban for their collaboration, as well as my supervisors and colleagues at the University of Oviedo, and of course all the other IMBRSea students, my family and my friends for their support during the last month. Thank you very much.